Sabbath is God's dominion over creation. That's what I just talked about. This gives us insight into Sabbath as gospel prophecy. I alluded to this a little bit, but I'm going to go into more detail. The gospel first emerges not from Genesis 3, where the judgment against the serpent is the seed of the woman will crush your skull. You'll bruise his heel and he'll crush your head. We look at that as the first messianic prophecy. I believe the Sabbath is the gospel prophesied because, well, I'll get to the because. The gospel first emerges from the Sabbath. It's preached in material creation. God's labor and kingship and rest is a type of predestination for man. And here's why I say it prophesies it, because man's first full day was in God's rest. Creation happened day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. Man finally is created, and it was the beginning, the morning and the evening, the sixth day, it was good. Man's created, and his first full day is in the seventh day of God's rest. So man is fully alive in the dominion of God, in the rest of God, in God's will for all of creation being expressed through his kingship. That's where Adam goes, what's my part in this story? His first full day is in the Sabbath rest of God. He came fully alive in the complete rulership of God as King of all creation. And the Sabbath, therefore, prefigures the completed work of Christ by which we enter the rest of God. How does God rule over a fallen world broken by sin? He conquers sin, and his Son goes and sits at his right hand, and you get to sit with him. You become reseated in the Genesis story. And so the Sabbath promise to you is you get to rest once again in his dominion. Adam lost it. Jesus regained it. You have that elevated position. And whether you see it that way or not doesn't change the fact that you are seated with Christ. Sabbath is intended to be a sacramental experience of grace for God's people. I don't believe, it's fine if you get insight and meaning out of celebrating the seventh day, whether you call that Saturday or Sunday. I appreciate the Shabbat ceremonies and so much of the kind of that Jewish tradition that many are finding a lot of meaning in. But I think if what you do is find meaning in the day and you don't find rest in God, then you've missed the point. And you can focus on what I would consider to be an overly literal and borderline legalistic application of, well, if we're going to obey God's law, we better not do anything on this day. And you can be striving in all of your life and not know what the Sabbath is about. So God made rest holy. He said in Mark, the Sabbath is made for man, not vice versa. He made rest holy, which means it's holy to rest. How are you made holy? You enter that point of time in which his nature cosmically intersects with your reality. That's called Sabbath. When you get into that rest, you get into his holiness. And his holiness gets into you. How are you made holy? You enter the Sabbath, which is his provision, power, kingship, and dominion that are rest for your soul. So the summary of this conversation of the Sabbath, which is a type and shadow. I don't want you to miss this. It's not just some little poetic thing in Genesis. It's an archetype. It's a type and shadow. It's a symbol so that when we get to the one who is rest for our soul, who talked about all authority given to him, his rulership, and the way by which he reveals himself so that people can see the Father. His rulership translating to revelation to us. And it's in that context he says, therefore take my yoke upon you, learn from me, and I'll give rest to your souls. When we understand his kingship and authority, when we get a revelation of that for our access to the Father, that's where we go, we can sit down in him also. We can rest in him also. And so, holiness and sanctification as a summary existed in God before sin, not in contrast to it or in response to it, because sin didn't exist in Genesis 2. So holiness and sanctification are concepts that can exist apart from sin, but for us, practically, all we do is think of them in relation to sin. And I don't believe we can press into what God really wants to do in us as long as we are making the avoidance of sin the ultimate definition of holiness. You can completely divorce yourself from sinful actions and thoughts and never enter the mystery of holiness. Our ability to enter in is inseparable from entering into his rest. That's where we come fully alive. The gospel is a perpetual invitation to believe in God's provision by which grace transmits Christ's life into us. So righteousness precedes and empowers the work of sanctification. Did you get that? Righteousness precedes and empowers the work of sanctification. You aren't trying to be sanctified so that you can be righteous. You receive righteousness so that you can be sanctified. And the process of being sanctified is learning to rest in what he's already done so that you just live out his life in you. You can't do it. You can't do it. I'm going to make the point later. The great mystery and glory of Christianity is the cheaters win. That's why he gave us the helper. Because you can't do it. He can. I'll take the help. Thank you. Being sanctified into his finished work is how we ourselves are set apart under his rule.